This has been, as Sylvia said from the start, a 4-year program. We're 4 years into an 8-year program, it will hopefully be. But it's been an exciting journey, I think, the 4 years now. I just got involved 4 months ago. My background more is from industry. I've been working in the automotive sector, both in innovation, a lot of operational, supply chain management, aftermarket, working more with the use of data and how we can use data for competitive advantage in industry. So that when Sylvia asked me to put together a panel discussion, I said, let's bring some industry people in that are using data. We're going to talk to get a little more insight around that. To start it off, I asked for just a short presentation from Fredrik Florberger, who's going to do a good bridge into, if you want to say, data from the origins of data and intelligence in the context of defense and the military. And as we've been working a lot with NATO here as well, and as an important part of the program here at GATE and the activities at GATE, I think it'll be a good bridge into the similarities between what we do in military and defense and what we do also within business, because a lot of the origins of business strategy come from the art of war and Sun Tzu. So what I think this will be is a good opener to the dialogue that we'll have up here as the panel. So, Fredrik?
I don't know if I really need this one. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. You might use it though because it goes into the system for anyone who's online.
Okay, so there are people online as well. All right. Then we'll use it and then I'll have to talk a little bit lower, all right? Okay, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and getting me the chance to talk a little bit about where I started to use data. And as Jonathan said, we are coming out of Sweden. My background is not only that I've been in the military, that's my first career. My second career is obviously in business or in industry. So I'm working out of a group which we have in Sweden with a few companies. And normally we try to help global organizations to be more data-driven. So that's where we have met, Jonathan, transforming a Swedish automotive company, pretty large one. So let's not bore you with that and see if this works. It does. So this is a little bit of the environment where I started my career. What you can see here are actually two exceptional Swedish inventions. The Visby Corvette on the left side, stealth technology, all produced and invented in Sweden. And actually on the right side you can see the Swedish combat boat, also a Swedish invention. And all of these are actually exported today. So we are sort of proud of our naval heritage. But the main question is, what can business learn from the military? And I know that there are a few people here who are connected to Diana, for example. And when I started this, that's more than 30 years ago, we were not that close to NATO yet. But during my career, we started to collaborate a lot more. So actually, in the end, when I was running one of our projects, or actually programs within the Swedish headquarters, I was tasked with discovering how do we use data. And as you will see, at that time, data was one thing, but we were not that actually, let's say, we were not looking for the data. We were looking beyond data already then. We were looking for the information. It was at that time, I looked up now using ChatGPT, actually. What's the difference between data and information? And when you make sense out of data, we at least then call it information. So we are moving a bit beyond what you have talked about already. But in the end, it's very much about blending two sides of the same coin. We're trying to get value out of what we do. In the military, we either want to fight the adversary in the most effective way or reduce the killings on our side. In business, we want to kill every adversary and reduce the cost of doing so. So that's the wrong direction here, okay. But in the end, from a military perspective, it's very much about mastering the dual of capabilities. If you don't have your capabilities aligned, you will be in disharmony, and that means that you will not work as efficiently as you intend in your operations. So when you prepare military forces for action, that's obviously something that takes a lot of time. You need to be ahead of the game, be ahead of your competition. So building competitive advantage is actually the main thing. And how do you do that then? Well, one thing is that you of course can try to figure out what your enemies intend to do, but obviously it often goes down to checking the technology trends. All of you have seen all these movies from Second World War and all of that when things are competing with each other, but if you really would look into it, you would find that the duel between technologies is what actually made up for the end of the Second World War. And even more interesting is that even if both sides would have had the technology, the one that would have won would probably be the one that is, if we use modern terms, the most agile one. And I'll come back to that. So, what we started with to move ahead a bit was in the late 90s, after the first Iraqi war or Kuwait war, there were a lot of new acronyms released. One was Revolution in Military Affairs, another was Dominant Battlespace Awareness, and everything was around how can we use modern technologies, how can we make information flow faster, how can we try to interpret the information, gather more information, and as you see, we wasn't talking about data, it was always information, information, information. So from a Swedish perspective, this was nothing new. We were all trained to collect, process, and share data or information and do that as quick as possible. Everybody knew that. It was invented years before, actually after the Vietnam War. But what was new was that we tried to do it in a new way. You see these arrows going upwards and then one going downwards. That was the traditional way, and still in many ways are actually. And when we went, let's say, head-to-head with the NATO idea of doing this was exactly what we met, because all information flow in silos. What we tried to do from a Swedish perspective was to make it less hierarchy. So we call it non-hierarchy information management, meaning that you can still have a command and control chain working in parallel, but the information should be easy accessible. So the main problem here, and now we are in the late 90s, was transmitting all that information. We utilized primarily HF, VHF, or UHF channels. So there were no gigabytes going back and forth at all. It was small bursts of information. But we actually managed to do that rather well. So what you can learn out of this is that if you focus, you can't see that because there are chairs in the way, but you need to understand what are the strategic details. When it really comes down to something important, what is it you have to focus on? And if you can focus on that, then you can often release enough power to manage, really great problems using and utilizing the information you have at hand. So, moving forward, we also had these, what we call what-if scenarios, because in the end, if you ask someone, which we did, we collaborated a lot with NATO at this point, and the EO, so what we asked was, okay, what information do you need? And everybody asked the same, and everybody answered the same. We need all the information. Okay, that's tricky. But if you're going to prepare for the unexpected, and that's where the UFO comes into play, is you need not only to think of what you need, it's also about how you will get it. Because the one thing you will be 100% certain of is that all your plans will fail, and you will never have the information. You understand that you will not find the information you need, and you will also understand that there is a totally new set of information necessary to actually achieve the objectives you're set up to, well, do. So, with that said, one key takeaway was that you need to be modular. Everything you need must be broken down in smaller pieces. Of course, you can see a Lego in front of you, but in this aspect, it's much more complex than that. You need to break down everything, not only the technology side of the problem. I would say it's more important to break down the methodology part of the problem. How are you, in this case, going to conduct operations? So what we did was that we created a component-based methodology so that each situation we anticipated that we could end up with would then be getting its, let's say, unique setup of methods to handle the situation that we saw was occurring on the horizon. So that made it super difficult for the guys who were going to design the technology to keep up with that pace of rapid change. So it gave us also a different type of information architecture and also a different type of technology architecture. And we see some of the result of that being more and more operationalized today, because it was, we actually didn't have the technology at the point, but we had other types of tech that we could use as an intermediary. So what you can see here is that the monolithic systems, of course, they will not work. We all knew that today, but what we often miss out is that we need the context. I mean, we need to frame the problems, we need to frame the situation, and we need to do that to a scale where it's possible to actually create the small fishes that you see here. And what I have experienced in many companies which we work with, or when we invest in companies, is that they have started in the opposite way. So they actually end up with sub-optimization instead. So moving forward, what we also discovered is that we have to handle a cognitive problem. And you mentioned Sun Tzu, for example. Clausewitz is another great thinker when it comes to military theory. Both have inspired many modern business leaders. And in this case, it's actually two American guys back to 1938 trying to solve a problem in dense traffic. So what they came up with was the term of field of safe travel, which has actually shows us where we can go safely from one point to another in a dense traffic situation. So all the cars pushing the field of safe travel from the sides, that's what we today call limiting factors. So setting an objective, trying to focus on how do we reach the objective and how do we see the travel from where we are to where we want to be is very much about handling all these dynamic factors that will push us from one side to another and make everything super difficult. Sometimes you will not find a field of safe travel. And then you have to attack the factor that is actually limiting you. And it's exactly the same thing we do when we struggle with the competitive advantage in our daily business. And maybe you saw up on the right that no one really wants revolution. We talk very much about disruption and disruptive behavior and see that as the key thing to success. I would say it's the totally opposite. Especially if we work in environments like life science or security or safety related organizations, it's actually harming the system more than it does good. So the key is to have a rapid evolution. And that's more about keeping up with findings, learnings, and create a true skilled knowledge within the organizations. And that trust will then bring the change by itself, because it's natural, it's evolution. So, in the military field, setting the, as I said, the context, the objective, and understanding that is the key task of one person and one person only. So I don't know if you have seen the riddle before. Maybe someone who is here from or has a background in the military have seen it. It's a rather classic one. If I say that that is a commander and that is a tent, we then get commander's intent. So, yeah, so now you shall laugh. Please, everyone laugh. It's, it's rather easy, okay? Yeah. Well, so commander's intent is a key thing in all military leadership, because that points out the direction. It sets the end state for where we want to go. It doesn't say exactly how we're going to do it. Well, the Americans see it that way, but Sweden, for example, doesn't do it that way. It's just an objective. The key thing is then to let everyone be part of the invention of the plan. And how do we really execute the operation that will take us to the end game, to the end state and to the objectives we have set up, which is then in the hands of our commanders. So this brings us to another interesting term, and you have probably heard it before. It's center of gravity. It was constructed by Karl von Clausewitz, so it's 300 years old approximately, but still interesting to discuss, and a lot of research is still going down into actually trying to understand how this is supposed to be used, what it means for us today. But it's easy to see it as a stool, where you have the center of gravity, which is the hub of all power, where all the energy that is up to you to destroy in order to win the war. So it's actually carried by critical capabilities, which upholds the center of gravity. It's then possible to challenge the capabilities, or from the defending side, understand that I have some of them that are critical vulnerabilities, and those are the ones you want to protect. And altogether, it requires something. So we are back to where we were before, the dual of capabilities and requirements. So you need critical requirements to build up the capabilities and also the vulnerabilities. So what is then happening is that if you strike one leg, you will tilt the entire center of gravity, and that's when you win the war. For example, in the first Iraqi war, Saddam Hussein was the center of gravity. If we move back to the medieval time, normally the capital was the center of gravity. If you took the capital, you own the country. But it's much more advanced today. And that's why it's interesting to see some of the focuses here at GATE, because they, of course, are positioned well in terms of what is depending on our center of gravity today. So, trying to finish this up, I would like to say that from an industry perspective, innovation is rather easy. It's not the hard thing inventing stuff or coming up with great ideas. I have my name on patents, mostly to show for some of my colleagues in my previous life and companies I've been in, that that's not the hard thing. So don't be too proud for having your name on a patent. The hard thing is trying to get the value out of it and actually operationalizing the findings. And I had a talk to one of your colleagues out here about the incubation of ideas here and how to bring it to the market. And of course, that's super interesting. So we also found out already in the military, but it's been more modern now, that if we can create resilient platforms that actually takes away very much of the complexity, we can ease up innovation. So for myself, I try to find, as often as possible, companies or organizations or problems that we can solve using solid platforms. If it's possible to create a super easy, not very advanced technology, none of that should go into the platform. It should be rock solid, very resilient, so that it can create prerequisites for innovation on top. That's the key thing here. So I think I'd leave it by that. So I'm sorry, the shape should be moving now, but we couldn't figure out how to manage that. But you can imagine, it's moving around. It's very dynamic. Well, we need to envision the future. And a key thing is then to bring the future to life by actually making sense out of it. So that we here in the present can take proper actions to reach something that is beyond reach today because it has not yet happened. And that's why skilled knowledge is a key thing. And we can acquire that, for example, through the research, a fantastic thing. I mean, the knowledge we own on a global scale today has never been more extensive. But as I think it was Jan who mentioned it before, it's rather hard to tap into. And of course, AI and different tools can help us find things that someone has already discovered, and we can create more value out of the next and the next and the next step. But then it's down to the operationalizing again. So building strategies and connecting the dots here and making it possible to travel from one state to another is super important. And it's very, very challenging. And I think Jonathan will mention it later, but it often comes down to the people who is involved. I mean, if we don't set a proper organization, if we are not really interested in organizing our companies or functions or research organizations, well, it will sadly not work out in the end. And therefore, I think it's very important to try to manage to both position for the future and excel in the present at the same time. You cannot choose, because you need the context of the future to be able to figure out what is relevant to today. And if you don't do that, you will not find the proper purpose or motivation to actually get your teams and your personnel committed enough to do all the hard work that is necessary to change things. And therefore, creating a flowing work structure is equally important. I mean, there is never the case that the top manager is more important than the operator. Jonathan learned me that early on, that the kings and queens are always in production, and I agree. And it's the same here. We are the production guys, and I'm proud of it. Even if I work with strategies and I work globally and I do a lot of what many people would say fancy things, I still see myself as a producer. I'm proud. I'm working with my machines. I'm trying to do the best out of that. So just to give your minds a little bit of education and training here in the late afternoon, I would like you to just look at the picture here. Does anyone see anything? Please raise a hand. And I will soon show you how stupid your brains are. And back to disinformation. Actually, one of our best professors in Sweden showed me this in the late 90s when I worked at the headquarters. And he was actually one of the inventors of both sense-making and the dynamic OODA loop, if that's of interest. So bear with me now, because things will happen in your brains. Okay? So what do you see now? So what do you see? What person? Jesus, exactly. And none of us have ever met Jesus. So we are, I mean, the thing is that the human brain is so easy to manipulate. You can call it leadership, or you can call it disinformation, or anything in between. But this is the key thing here. If we are going to use information in the future and we really want to achieve a competitive advantage, I think trust is the key thing. If you can trust that the data you are using, the information you're working with, everything that should go into your data-driven decision models and everything like that, maybe be automized in the end, all of that must be trusted. So I think you're on to something really great here at GATE. And I will be delighted to follow the development because it's super important. So, Jonathan, I think you're going to wrap this up. Sorry for taking not just a few minutes.
No, thank you, Fredrik. Let's give him an applause. So, thank you. No, and I think we're going to talk about here as we sit and have our fireside chat with the panel here. You're welcome to all come up now. Is that we're going to talk about the importance as leaders about not trying to go out and test everything that's thrown at us, because that's what innovation is about. Innovation is trying lots and lots of things, but understanding what is it you want to get out of innovation, and that's in the strategic details. So you can pull up the slide again, sorry. There. Yeah. Is in the strategic details, and I think that's something we forget because in the context of what we try to do, both with AI and data and information and big data, is it all comes down to actually the expert who can provide the context to understand what the data actually means. If we don't have experts that understand data and understand the technologies, we can't get any value out of the technologies. So it's really important that we engage industry, we engage the public sector, we engage academic, because together we have a collective expertise to come at it from different perspectives. We'll see Jesus again, sorry. I'll learn this sometime. So. And I think, here it's really about, the people again, and the relationships, because I think trust comes from relationships. That's something we unfortunately lost during COVID, as we kind of got locked up and we put screens between us. And I think it's important now as we've gathered here today, that we start to reconnect those relationships, the physical ones, the personal ones, where trust is built between people. And that's really what this is about, trust in industry, trust in academics, trust in politics, to try and achieve the types of change that need to happen in the world that we live in today. So with that, we'll kind of go over to our panel here. So you can turn this one off now, actually, or put the GATE screen up. So. Yeah. So, but I was thinking before, as we start here, I'll just let the other panel members introduce themselves. So, Jordan.
Sure. My name's Jordan Kane. I'm originally a rare diseases researcher who's gone into drug development and commercialization. And for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been working on building health data research networks and across jurisdictions and regions and within hospitals, and curating, helping the health system work out how to make good use out of its data.
Thank you. I'm Ahmed Wadani, and I have an engineer background. I've been working in mobility sector, in infrastructure, building bridges, but also in automotive industry. Been working with building the Northvolt Gigafactory, and now I'm working with collaboration, creating, facilitating collaboration specifically between corporate and startups. Every time we had a problem, looking at that problem, we came out that the missing part is collaboration. So I'm trying to help with that.
Okay. So, cutting time. Okay. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Karel Kral. I'm CEO of Electrohold, means for the Bulgarians quite clear who I am. But I'm almost 15 years in utility business in Albania, Romania, now for almost 8 years or a bit more than 8 years here in Bulgaria. But prior to that, I've been for 12 years in telco business and with Alcatel-Lucent, but not only telco, as well railroad signaling. So all of the stuff which trying to make sure that the trains are not going to collide. And prior to that, started my career as a lot of us in Big Four in consulting, in implementing the SAP system to our clients and so on. So I have a bit past of the digital guy slash IT implementation of the FI and the CO modules in SAP, getting to telco, and finally in the utility. I think we have one more here. So maybe I can use this one. Yeah.
Great. So, well, I think to start it off here, I mean, the elephant in the room is Karel, and that we don't have any heat today. So, so we already done the due diligence on that one, so we know that it doesn't come down to the inability to turn it on. So, but I think, I mean, all seriousness, I think what we try to do here in the panel is to put together representation of different industries and how they utilize data, how they can leverage AI in creating competitive advantage. So I wanted to jump a little bit into it here and talk a little bit around what we call future trends in preparedness. And in that one, you know, it's really around evolution, because it all, as Frederick said, it kind of all starts with an understanding of what you want to achieve. Looking into the future, looking into what it is, where the future is heading, and trying to actually envision how to get to that future before getting there. So when we think in terms of considering the rapid evolution of technology, what do you think in your industries that you represent here? How do you see are the biggest changes that are impacting your industries? If we start with health here, Jordan.
It's really broad. The biggest, I mean, I think the biggest changes, I think one of the things it's a struggle for the healthcare sector is its inability to change. You know, so it's got some of the most valuable, useful data, and yet struggles to understand and use its own data, and struggles to communicate about how to even create frameworks to make progress in that space. You know, change is a real difficulty and a challenge for the healthcare sector. It's something that motivates a lot of thinking for me.
Yeah. I think in the mobility industry, one big change, like it's coming, is how easy it became to be like an automotive manufacturer brand. Like if years ago someone want to be an OEM, like it would be very difficult. It will take years. But now, and it will be more easier in the future, companies will start with the help of different, with the help of collaboration and integrating different solutions, but also with the help with AI and the share of data. You can build million of lines of software code in days. So that's one big change that is coming. Another one is also from customer perspective. Customers are looking for more integrated solution. They don't care about who are the building block behind. So if you see the vehicle, inside the vehicle there is software, they want infotainment, they want energy grid, they want health, even there's driver monitoring system about the health system. So there is a lot of building block inside, but the customer have this maturity now, and it will grow in the future, that he wants only one interface and have bundled solutions and not to deal with different players. That's for me.
I got my own. Well, it's a tricky question, Jonathan. I work across so many different industries, but I try to summarize it, and I then think it's back to actually operationalizing the use of modern technologies. I actually like the old word IT, information technology, and I mean, getting organizations up to speed and transform them to a state where they actually can work data-driven. Often they have read a little bit too many books about how they should do it, or been to inspirational speaks and things like that. So they have stopped thinking by themselves. So if they could just spend more time on framing the problem, they would much quicker design a proper solution to actually execute in the end. So I think that's where I try to focus, at least, helping them to understand what they need to solve and how they can use and must use modern technologies to get the sufficient data set in place, and then adopt their operating models in accordance with that.
Well, how much time you give me? Do I have an hour or something? Because the point for me is, for us in the energy sector, I'm convinced that the energies or the utility business is one sector which is in front of the tremendous change, and you can call it transformation or revolution, evolution, whatever, but in fact what we see is that what has happened in telco in the last couple of years, coming from the analog to digital and stop selling impulses, where we all remember that, or maybe not here people, but you've been charged for the seconds or minutes for talking. Now you're getting the lump sum payment with the package of different services, IPTV in it, and so on. That's what is in front of the utility business as well. We are traditionally selling kilowatt hours, right? That would not be the future of energy business. We will be selling the packages of services. And that's, I think, the main change in front of the energy, coming from the fact that the traditional energy topology from having the big power plants somewhere far from the cities, using the transmission network to bring the energy to the cities, then distribute it to the end customers by the DSOs. That's going to change, and it's changing already by introduction of so-called distributed generation. So everyone has the solar photovoltaic panels on the roof, having the batteries, having the electric cars, which can be used as well as the resource which will return the energy into the grid. So that's completely changing the game. And without the digitalization of the grid, without knowing what is really happening at the moment in the real time, this would not be possible. So digitalization of the grid is the main enabler for the transformation of the energy sector in the future.
And I'll shoot right back at you, Karel.
Yeah, okay.
How is data helping you operationalize that strategy? Because if you see what's needed, that digitalization of the grid is important, how is the data, like we talked about last night, how are you using that into embedding that into your operations and preparing your organization for that change?
Well, in principle, it's not a question how it helps. It's a question, without the data, without digitalization, it would not be possible. Because, as I said, in the past, if you have been dispatcher, and I hope that I do not have any colleagues from dispatching here, because they will kill me probably, because I'm going to say that their job was fairly easy in the past. Which was not the case, of course, but when you had the big power plant and then electrical lines, which we call feeders, from them going to the end customer, it was pretty straightforward. Okay, there's an energy source, and there's a line, and there's an end user at the end, and if you switch it off somewhere, you cut the line, you know that the rest of the chain is without the electricity, and you can send the field force for the maintenance work. You know that there is a problem there, and so on. And there was a couple of points like that, and it's been, of course, it was not a couple, it was thousands, where you need, as a dispatcher, to take care about. Now, having the different sources, small producers, prosumers, sharing the energy, electric cars which can return the energy into the grid as well, you have much more points, and it's not in the thousands anymore, it gets in the millions, where we have to have online information, a real-time information, and without a digitalization, without a AI which will help you to make a proper decision at the proper time, this can lead to the blackouts. Because that's what we do not, in many cases, we do not understand that if the dispatcher is making a wrong decision, the domino effect is going to take out on the whole grid. And then it's not as easy as you say, okay, my power is down in my house, so I put a plug again on, and the house is working. The energy system needs to be plugged on step by step, because if you do it immediately for the whole grid, then it's down again immediately. Eh? So because you need to step by step to put the power on back. So the AI and the digitalization will help to the dispatchers. So in fact, it will take the decision. If I push the button and say, okay, switch it off here, then the AI will sit back and say, if you do that, then you might put down the whole grid. Or if you put that transformer on, the physical, the technical losses or the losses from the transformation will go up or will go down. It will advise me what is the proper dispatching. Should I, because the grid is usually done in circles, should I route the energy in this direction or the other direction? That would lead to the better and more effective utilization of the grid and more secure supply to the end customers. So, in fact, without that, I cannot imagine in the future how the grids will operate, having in mind all the new resources which are to be connected to it. That's a part of the dispatching. And then we come to the interesting part of how we're going to build that energy. It's like who's going to pay off for that, who's going to produce, who's going to be paid, and who should pay. But that's other area which is a very broad exercise which needs to be solved. And then we are getting to the questions like a blockchain and sharing the energy between the two customers and so on.
No, I think, just going back to Richard's comments in the first session, also, if we think about the data, the amount of data today, and we think about what's happening in transforming the energy industry, what's transforming healthcare, mobility, intelligence, and surveillance, and those areas, is that the amount of data compared to what's been created versus what's in the future is exponentially, by 1,000 times exponentially being created. And that creates new challenges and new capabilities that are needed to achieve that. But in terms of operational impact, I think one you talked about, Jordan, in change in the healthcare. What do you see are the ways to break through that resistance to change in the healthcare? How can data help support that and AI capabilities?
It's kind of a chicken and the egg problem because data is so integral to being able to measure what change worked, identify where change is needed. And at the same time, the accessibility and the utilization, the analytic readiness of the data and the frameworks for implementing that are not well understood in the healthcare sector and very sparsely deployed. There's so much potential for transformation of healthcare, and the use cases are almost limitless. But the the question of the ability to change the healthcare is a deeply intellectual one in some ways, because a lot of people are studying it, and no one's got a clean answer to that. I can, speaking from my experience, when you are looking at something as challenging as building a data network, you're having to build alliances and buy-in across multiple levels with people with multiple different skills and interests and motivations, and that costs money to simply have the conversations and to have all of that knowledge and to understand where all the historical resistance is from. It's very much it's a type of organisation that is designed not to change. But but by doing those things, we've been able to build networks. We've been able to unleash data. So it is possible, but it requires a deep sympathy to the organisation.
I think one to add to that, I think also as you talk about the complexities in energy, we talk about the complexities in healthcare data. I think another one is in transportation and mobility and the movement of goods. And how supply chains are being transformed by digitalization as well. And Ahmed, a little bit in the mobility sector that you work in, and how do you see, as you work with both infrastructure side of building roads and things like that, but then also work in the mobility side, how is data important to proper planning of transport infrastructure and free movement of goods and those types of activities, so from a mobility perspective?
Yeah. Data is very important and it's key, and especially in the mobility sector, it's a high capex investment. So if any decision about how to modify both the infrastructure or the automotive, it's very high capex, lot of investment, lot of time to make it happen, and it need to be from that perspective, but also from safety. For example, if I take one example, safety, and now we have cars with a lot of sensors where they can, based on those sensors, can have a perception, and there's AI models inside to compute this data and build scenario. But even with this data that is collected is not enough. You need to cover all the scenarios, all the edge scenarios, and there is not enough data about all the edge scenarios. So you need to create synthetic data to simulate that and to train your models and cover those perspectives. And even with that, it's not enough because you don't see beyond the range of the sensors, because if you are turning around the corner, you don't know what is happening behind, or so you need also infrastructure data to collaborate and distributed learning with the data from the infrastructure to have better decision making it's very, very broad, very complex, and you need a lot of we haven't figured out yet how making everyone involved in this value chain to integrate, to work together and to share the outcome. Each time we want to work on data sharing or creating insights from data, we are stuck about NDAs and IP discussions and things like that. So it's very important, and it's not solved yet. That's my perspective.
I think a question for you, Frederick, then. Also, you talked a little bit about platforms. And I think as platforms help abstract away a lot of complexity behind it. And you talked in the connection of creating resilient platforms to enable innovation on top of it. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you mean by that? How we unlock innovation to happen when we have a stable foundation to stand on? So.
Yes, I do think that for most people, for example, AI is something rather abstract. And maybe we should ask ourselves, what do we actually need AI for? And I think at least that the main reason is not that we are going to do more and more fancy presentations or get avatars dancing on the screens. It's about solving some of humanity's largest problems. And the key thing for me at least is the climate change that is occurring. So we need to find ways to take down the stress on most of the systems we see around us. And if there are smart people, like many in the room here, people doing research, public funded or private funded, it doesn't matter, but if we can push that into to platforms, making it much easier to access the knowledge and actually working on top of all the conclusions, then we can create a better environment where we can leverage knowledge on a global scale. And I do think that the major tech companies do that in a great way. There are examples when we can do that also in other fields. We just need to ask ourselves, can I package this in a in a way that is easy to consume? I work that way all the time. You know that, and we have done it together also. So leveraging knowledge that must be the next big thing. So packing things into platforms, taking away complexity, and make it easy to fail well on top of it. I mean, that's what it's all about. I'm failing all the time, well or not. Sometimes it's very expensive, and that's a sad thing. But sometimes you're publicly funded. It's easier to fail well then. You're not getting fired. I don't know if it answered your question, but it's such a huge question. But innovation is as we said, innovation is easy. Operationalizing is hard. So put the innovation where it sort of gets driven by a true cause and strong purpose, and with people that are really committed to what they're doing.
And innovation in energy, I mean, that must be also is a very traditional and seen as a legacy in industry. And I think, as you said, digitalization being so important. So what do you see as the needs for innovation in just the energy sector?
Well, I think I very liked what Fredrik said about packaging it in a way that it will be easy to use for the end consumers and so on. Because, in fact, in theory, for the energy systems, the task is not as difficult. It's a lot of math to calculate, probably similar to construction of the highways. What is the proper capacity of the highway needed? What is the proper need of the generation capacity and so on, and how to utilize it to balance it over the time that it's always used and that the final bill is the lowest possible. Unfortunately, there is a factor which makes that much more difficult, and that factor is called client. Because first, in order to utilize the energy grid in the most efficient way, I need to be motivated for that. So me as a customer, saying that frankly, I don't want to hear about my energy supplier as the year is long, because I just want to be sure that in my plug there's electricity, and that once a year I get a bill. Hopefully I don't get a heart attack when I see it, and that's it. It's like, well, then don't bother me with anything. But that's the point. When I have the economic motivation, when I see that I might get some benefit of proper usage of the grid, or be thinking about how do I use electricity, then I will start to think about. Then I have a next factor, and that's the how easy that would be, because then the next battle would be, fine, okay, I'll say to my wife, well, you're starting the washing machine only at a certain time, and you need to follow up when the energy is cheap, and what is the weather condition, because if there is a sun, there is a lot of solar energy which is cheap, and by the way, we have the solar panels on the roof, so when we are producing our own energy, then you are going to wash the dishes or whatever. Then this is a lost battle from the beginning, as she said, but okay. go there. So the point there is to introduce the technologies and the digitalization of the appliances in a way that would be customer friendly to use. So we all know that we have the appliances where you can say, okay, start not now, but start in 3 hours or 4 hours. The exercise would be different. It's like I'll have to tell to the appliances when it should be done. As in 8 hours, decide whenever you want to wash the dishes. Decide whenever you want to charge the electric car. The only thing is I want to be sure that 7:30 morning when I'm going to leave to the office that the car is charged. How you use it, when charging, when discharging, I will leave that completely to the AI to decide, and to the grid operator and so on. So it's the way that the appliances should be prepared in a way that the decision for the most efficient usage of the grid would be decided on them, and that, as I said, I see the two main difficulties in that is the how it's easy to use for the customer, but as well the economic motivation. And there, unfortunately, I would say one of the biggest problem in that are the politicians and the question of availability and affordability of the electricity. Indeed, and I do not. I'm definitely for that. The energy should be affordable and that should be available to everyone. But the thinking that the electricity is a social tool to allow everyone to use it, and the price of the energy is a social tool is a wrong, because then the economical stimulus is missing, which is not saying that we should not help the ones who cannot afford the energy, but it should not be through the price, because then we are then we are not allowing the market to develop in the proper way and to introduce the new technologies there.
Great. And I think, I mean, this whole thing around, as you're getting into here, you know, using data information as a social tool. And I think in terms of, we talk a lot in terms of AI, data, technology, in terms of privacy and ethics. I think one thing in health, you face these challenges because of the breadth and detail of information. So in terms of how these considerations in when to use AI, when not to use AI, how is that impacting also in the healthcare debate around health data, which you've been working a lot with, Jordan? So.
Yeah. When to use AI? It's more of a question, can you use AI? So I remember a question being asked to me at a conference, do you think it's ethical to use AI on health data? And it kind of took me by surprise, because I didn't realize this had blown up in the newspaper that morning. So, but it's this, it sort of emphasizes this issue that there's a much bigger social license around health data that you know, if you're doing an algorithm that looks at the data 10 times versus an AI model that looks at it 1,000 times, it may not seem logical to some people that that's substantially different, but you've got a social system that's saying, well, actually, this is our data. We want to be comfortable with what you're doing. We want to understand what this means and what the implications of it are. So how do I tie this back to the question? AI is a great piece of technology. You put good data into AI, and you're allowed to. And if you're allowed to put good data into AI, then you'll get great results from it. the problem in healthcare is you've got a long way to go to get to the point of actually putting stuff in the AI, because you need to make sure that there's a framework to be able to use the data, get access to it, curate it so that it's coherent, that the meaning's not lost when you go and put that into the machine.
Great. Well, that was kind of the questions but I wanted to actually leave it to the audience, if that's okay with you guys, to give them the opportunity to ask some questions to our panelists here. So anyone who would be a taker.
Is there anything these fine specimens of the human species disagree about? You're all so darn polite. What do you disagree about?
The Swedish influence.
We're well prepared.
We have disagreed yesterday. Today is yes day. But yesterday on the dinner we have disagreed a lot.
There's got to be something that we disagree about, don't you think?
I'm sure there's something in there. So
I want to see some fireworks. Fist fights. I want fist fights.
I got something I disagree with.
okay. Oh, all right.
I don't think many of the ideas around innovation necessarily easily transfer from between business and healthcare delivery. And the reason I say that is some of these fundamental drivers, and you were sort of touching on it just a second ago, talking about the alignment around commercial incentives. Profit for a healthcare provider, and I said this the other day, is not obvious. Profit is almost always seen as expanding the range of services that are provided, and if a healthcare system makes a loss, it pulls back on what services it can provide. So that framework just it's like a chalk and cheese when comparing it to how we transfer innovation into that system. I hope that was
Anyone else that disagrees?
No.
We have, with Karel, we have been discussing the ownership of data, like on the smart meter for his case, or inside the car for mobility sector. That's also who, and the consent from the customer, who owns the data. Is it the consumer, the customer, the provider, for energy grid provider, or the vehicle OEM, or and how to share the value that is created from that data. That also
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. Since the 90s, if you buy a new car, you sign a very long agreement which gives the car manufacturer the right to suck every bit of data out of your vehicle. It's already arranged. You do not own the data in your car. EU Data Act.
No.
The audience is disagreeing with each other. Yeah, so,
Who owns your healthcare data?
yeah, so I actually think, so that, I mean, that's something that regular, I mean, when I worked in industry, and data became important in 2007, we rewrote 59 end-user license agreements. You know, the thing that you just click through? And also the new Data Act, I love it. Yeah, I don't even know what it says, but I know that what will happen is that the big providers will just say, if you want to use our services, click this button, because otherwise no service. And that button gives them the right to use your data. That's at least how it will go. I mean, that's how it worked with GDPR, with everything else. Yeah, if you don't approve, no service. Right? So we should stop talking about who owns the data. We should just regulate it. Put it in a legal agreement, have people tick the box, and you're home free. Because otherwise this becomes such a complicated mess.
That's exactly what the NHS did. They said, this is public services, this is being paid out of the public wallet. Therefore, if we want to analyse your data, it's we have a duty to protect your identity and protect any harm from that data use to you, but we're going to use it. And other countries are sort of thinking about that as well, but it brings it's a lot of political capital wrapped up in that. So pushing forward with that is a risk, yeah. We've got some more questions over here. This looks good.
Just a compliment, because it happens that I've been following this issue about the extended vehicle access to data, the extended vehicle model. So it's not only the Data Act that provides for consumers giving consent, but how? It opens a lot, leaves a lot of things open, but there is the new competition framework, the new guidelines for the application of competition rules for access for independent repairers and publishers. So that has just come out. And in the pipeline, there is also the sector-specific legislation, the type approval legislation, that will come out normally before the end of this commission. That should make quite clear that whatever is the model, extended vehicle or something else, in any event, the access has to be given in a manner that preserves competition in the aftermarket for repair purposes. Just a footnote.
Just a footnote.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the Data Governance Act, the Digital Service. But I actually did want to come back to the healthcare thing. There are a lot of instances where people are interested. We're running a trial with genetic data, and we have real patient data with people with cancer that they're like super enthusiastic about sharing their data. Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, I think there's a great opportunity there as well. And I had a follow-on question, but I'll ask it later.
Well, I got a response to that.
Yeah, I see you've got a...
Which is that I've been involved in projects where we've looked at that question of what's the willingness of just to contribute to people to contribute their data. Ideas like calling it a walking biobank, where your data is available and you simply can come in to donate some tissue or donate some other information, give some surveys or whatever. The willingness is around about 80 to 90%, or 75 to 90%, depending on how that question is being asked. So there's definitely a willingness, and that's informing new approaches to health data sharing in creating these opt-in environments where you can join and contribute your data. And you see in the US, there's now, and the UK, there's an obligation to port your data to a third party if the patient wants that to happen. The devil in that detail is just how analytic friendly that ported data is, and there's a much bigger question there.
Yeah, there's also some issues with, as an individual, how much right you have to your own data. So, for example, if you're my brother, can I give away my genetic data? Because it also tells something about you, especially where there's genetically related diseases and you're looking for insurance, that the insurance company might get a hold of your genetic data or something like that. So I think that it's actually quite
incidental
complicated.
findings is the term. Yeah.
But I did want to ask something to the whole panel. With data and AI and all of the applications that you're working on and the good that you think that data is doing and AI is doing for your industries, do you think there's a possibility that AI and the use of data and the openness of data will create a two-speed society where some people will not have access to data and AI, and some countries won't have AI-enabled healthcare and fall further behind? Will we get a haves and have-nots society coming out of it? Will there be a new digital divide?
I tend to think not. I tend to think that once the gold-plated use cases are generating rivers of value in terms of impact on patients' lives, it will force political alignment on whatever those secret ingredients are that actually solve the problem. So if it brings the success, it will bring the political capital to drive the change as well. At the moment, we don't have big, strong use cases for scaled transformation of data practices in healthcare, at least.
Yeah, I've liked the picture shared by Friedrich about the center of gravity and those legs for the chair, and not everyone have the right legs even for developing countries, and you need, like if I take the autonomous drive in car, it have been happening right now because we first they have started by making driving by wire, like accelerating, braking, steering by wire. So it was like a prerequisite to, after that, bring AI on top of it to steer and accelerate. But you need this prerequisite first. And a lot of developing countries, and they don't have that. So it will be two speeds. And even inside developing country, it will be two speeds between, I think that open source will develop, but we will have like this 1 year or six months behind the development that is happening in, like if we take, for example, Microsoft and OpenAI, and the level they have reached in generative AI, that level of knowledge will not be transmitted to public, like to be available to public within. It will be available within time. So, and in those fields, if you can have like more intelligence, looking at all the IPs and patents and the research paper to generate new knowledge, and you have that 6 months before the others, it will make difference between even actors inside developed countries.
My answer to your question is yes. And I think it actually will be multiple speeds. And I mean, I've seen it all. It happens all the time. And I think it's the nature of evolution. We need some forerunners, and we need someone to pick up what's left after them. And at some point, this is where I can become a bit confused, actually, because if governments or huge organizations like the EU or even NATO could own, develop, and share their technologies, maybe that's a more democratic way than letting it get commercialized, because then we also try to get as much money out of it as possible. And I mean, still, I like doing business. I believe in that type of environment, of course. But at the same time, greed is often causing great negative effects. So at some point, it can become an academic problem, meaning that it's not really a problem, but it's nice to discuss and research. On the other hand, it's an extremely dangerous situation. We all know that, and it's constantly debating about who has the right to information and data and all of that. But I'm not sure that we should spend that much time actually on trying to figure out what to do about it. At some point, if we think the greater good is to just let it happen, and the greater good for me is that we could manage to still live on Earth, at least our kids and their kids. And I mean, that's the main reason why we need AI. We don't need AI to become older. I mean, as by today, we probably get about 100 years old. I don't expect me to be older than that. So, I mean, healthcare, yes, but not for that reason. It's to take down the stress on the system. Use AI to actually be able to access the care we need. The same is for cars. I mean, I've been working a lot with autonomous driving and things like that and trying to find out how these companies are going to be set up to actually be able to even accomplish a little bit about what everything could be. But in the end, what is autonomous driving about? Well, less driving, more resource-effective companies, and probably in the end, less combustion engines. So, I mean, AI, at least from my point of view, is helping us competing with the lack of time we have to fix some of the major problems. So, yes, multiple speeds, problem, yes. Problem, can we solve it? Probably not.
Well, from my point of view in the energy sector, I tend to agree with Frederick. The answer would be yes as well. But you've been looking for some fight, so I will say as well yes and no at the same time. Yes, because the introduction of new technologies in the energy sector indeed would be led by the forerunners, early adopters, the more developed countries. But having in mind that what is the ultimate goal of that? Why do we introduce the AI into the energy systems? Because we need to incorporate more and more renewables in it to change the structure of the energy system in distributed generations, to have more prosumers, the energy sharing and so on. That's the why we are doing it. And the ultimate goal of that one is to reduce the carbon footprint of the energy sector. That's where we are started from. And the energy transformation is about the 4 Ds. On the first D is the decarbonization. And if we say, okay, we are going to decarbonize our part of the world and we don't care what is happening in the other part, then, fine, but the air is not going to get better if we are decarbonizing our energy sector and let the other part to use the fossil fuels so we would be forced finally to share the technologies and the knowledge with them, and with whatever kind of motivation systems, either donating it to them, granting on the loan basis, whatever, we will be forced to share with them that, and to make sure that these technologies are shared worldwide in order to achieve the target we want. So yes and no.
And actually, I want to add one thing, because I'm looking at Sylvia, and I think Sylvia, I learned something yesterday that I think you should suggest an investment in here. Maybe Jan can help out with some of his industrial friends in Sweden. Google released their new quantum computer yesterday, or if it was the day before. It is 240 million times faster than their previous one. And in 6 seconds, it can process all the data we have produced on Earth for the last 47 years. So I think that could suit well here in the building. But it's also back to your question about 2 speeds. I think the computing capacity is, of course, also of great interest. Who will own the best computers in the future? And who will control that technology? Because one thing is the algorithms, another thing is the actual brain power and the production capacity. So back to the operators, the kings and queens. They owned by Intel no more.
Did you want to respond to that, John? So, do we have any other questions? So,
I think the answer will be 42.
42, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if it's in the scope of this discussion, but nevertheless, I'd like to ask you, do you know of experiments with nuclear fusion as opposed to fission? And this is the question for Karel, maybe. Because do you think that it would mean like free electricity for everyone, or is it science fiction? What do you think?
Well, I'm a big fan of nuclear fusion. And I'm on all the occasion I'm saying, well, I do believe that once we'll get there. As far as I know, the scientists are usually saying, well, we are just a couple of decades in getting closer and closer, so we need a couple of decades to be there. And I think they are repeating that from the 70s. There is definitely a development in that direction. I think it was at the beginning of this year, it's not so long ago, where we have had achieved the first time reaction where we have get more energy from the nuclear fusion than what we have entered in. So I think this is a great step forward. Indeed, the scale is still far from being able to commercialize, but I personally believe that the day will come and we will find a way how to use the nuclear fusion for the energy sector. I might not be seeing it, but my kids for sure.
I just want to add that it's a very complex technical problem, but very soon we will have a very smart guy run on quantum computing. He will go to all the paper and he will solve it, like maybe in 10 years.
10 minutes.
In 10 minutes.
Maybe, sure. I'm optimist in that.
Yeah, that's actually I actually had a question for everyone out here, which is, I mean, do we even know if AI, when do we have a sense that AI will be able to discover? So when you know, is that something that we don't think is ever going to be possible, or is AI running scientific discoveries and making scientific discoveries actually something that's feasible and we should be thinking about in our planning and investment? It feels like a philosophical question, but it seems like an important one for investment decisions.
Maybe define discovery? First? What do you mean by discovery?
For example, let's let the AI solve fusion. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question to the panelists, but before the question, I will give the ground for it. I'm starting with what Ian said, that the importance of AI is because it gives different value to the potential users. And here is, I believe, one of the problems we are experiencing in the technical sector, where we are trying to apply AI to data. We don't have enough data, we don't have good data. Why? If you take the business relations, they are self-regulated, because when you have a contract between the two parties, the contract says rights and obligations. When it comes to, say, the society can benefit from the technology, from analyzing the data, how can the society enforce the owners of the data to share their data? There is a way. The government can issue certain laws and regulations. But the problem is here that the government, we have GDPR. It's about protecting. It's about rights. It's not about permissions. And it's not about obligations, sorry. So what if we have institutionalized the obligations to the obligations to the owners of the data to share their data so that we can use it and for the benefit of society? What is the situation in your business?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that briefly before in healthcare, that there are legislations that are put forward to obligate the portability of data. It doesn't solve the analytic problem, though, unfortunately, in that you're porting data that's not easily analyzable, and you could be making it difficult to analyze in the process of porting it. In terms of the obligation with government to actually drive the benefits to the healthcare. Well, I mean, I think if it could, it would. But it struggles with huge stalemates between how it wants to fund care and how carers want to deliver care. So adding on another piece about, hey, we would like you to use data to change your care completely, the healthcare comes back with another answer saying, well, we'd like to do this, and we'd like to do this, and we'd like to do this. I don't know if that's a very clean answer to your question, because it's a complex question.
It varies from country to country.
Yeah, I will say, like it have been said by the audience, you just need to create a great value proposition that really answers something or need for a customer, and after that you give him this offer as a freemium for 3 months or something, and if he try it and he see the benefit, he is willing to accept all the consents that are needed. And I have seen some startups doing this kind of, and we have all Gmail or Google things, and we just each time they pop up with we have changed our GDPR policy, and you just click yes, because you have a good value proposition that you can't say no.
I think it's a really, really good question, and I've been on to the same issue for a long time actually. And a few years back, we made a huge project within the Swedish government, which we supported, and it was very much about in what way could we, let's say, update the infrastructure, the things that we still fund with tax money, so we all own it together. How can we make it more smart? We are talking about the smart cities, but we had more of the angle, the smart country. So where could we access data points that could then be shared on a national level for research or for companies who want to build third-party solutions or whatever they need the data for? And actually, one of the key findings was that we had a lot of data, but the different parts of the let's say the system situation was not likely to solve how to share the data, store the data, and make it accessible. So, well, as it usually is, it ended up with nothing. And I think they are still struggling to solve this. But, I mean, all technical solutions are there already. Most laws and regulations are in place, so it's back to operationalizing the change, taking the major decisions, make the rather low investments actually, because there are no great investment necessary, because all the things you need is data centers, and data centers are commodity today. So I think it's a very relevant question. How can we democratize? How can we leverage the already existing data, and how can we together understand where the major gaps are, because there are always gaps, and how can we then maybe place more sensors in the environment where we live, and track the data we lack, and sort of build a better and better, what we call in the military, common operational picture.
Well, for the energy sector, I think we are still in the phase that we are starting to realize how much data we do have or we can collect from the users. So, answering the part of the question, is there a regulation in place? Well, there is no specific regulation yet, as far as I know, for data sharing of from the grids. But the debate is there. who should, and Ahmed mentioned already, who should own the data from the smart meters, or for what purpose that might be used? Should the data be given to the traders for commercial use? Should it be regulated and remain at the national level for the energy security supply and the balancing of the grid only? What would be the aggregation of that data to be used? Should we detach the user from the data itself? Should we give the user the potential to opt in or opt out for the sharing of the data? So the debate is definitely there. It's because, as I said, we still do not really realize how detailed information we can get out of the usage of the electricity. We can get the information where you have returned home, where you have been for holidays with your electric cars, where you charge it, and putting that all together with the credit card usage and so on and so on, that can create quite a good snapshot of your behavior. And there definitely is a big question mark how to secure that data would not be misused, and not only misused in terms of the commercial. Okay, we can target you with the advertisement, or we can offer you better products, fine. But that can be misused by the enemies. And now going to the military part of the story, the energy supply, it's a question of the national security as well. And it's, I think Frederick will confirm that the energy infrastructure is one of the primary targets for any military operation. So having in mind that the grid is now would be much more digitalized, well, I don't need any more rockets and bombs to shut off one country. Maybe the part of the code and some virus sent to the energy system servers would make the trick better than the bomb. So that's definitely part of the discussion which is in front of us.
Anders Engström, Chalmers Industriteknik. A couple of years before COVID, I learned that internet consumed more energy than the combined airline traffic operations. So, simple question, is AI CO2 positive or CO2 negative today?
Oh. Well, it's maybe Jan can answer. Yeah, probably. But frankly speaking, I don't know. Definitely in terms of energy usage, what I've heard is what I've seen. It's not neutral. It's rather negative in terms of the energy usage. But the question is, for me, in terms of CO2 neutrality, or it's a question always of what kind of energy are we going to use. You can have the same question for the electric vehicles. As long as we are going to charge the electric vehicles with the energy from fossil fuels, they are not CO2 positive as well. The same is valid for all the servers. So for me, the question is rather how fast we can incorporate the emission neutral, or let's say emission-free energy. I don't like too much the definition renewable, because it's more about the emission-free sources of energy for me.
Great. I think our time is out. So,
yeah. One thing, because of the question before.
Sylvia, you're the one. We have a time to catch, but.
Okay. Just really quickly, I think generative AI are about a factor of 10 more energy consumption, computationally consumption, than a Google query. And 90% of AI is used for Gen AI, people asking questions. So I think the answer is very bad. But I just wanted to come back to the question of, should it be open and free that the gentleman was asking before? If we consider Formula One racing, you know, should Ferrari give away their fluid dynamics information and data to Mercedes? I mean, should that happen? Or should IDC, my company that, you know, employs people all over the world, and what we do is collect data and analyze and compute, should we be giving that away free? I mean, who's going to pay for my salary? And
I'll be very quick in my response.
I actually wanted to answer that one.
Oh, no. American to American.
But I think one thing I think that you're getting towards is this idea of openness, and I think that goes back to kind of Frederick's presentation here, and that's around trust, and that's an individual question. I think for each company is by sharing my data, do I trust the users of that data enough to allow them access to it? And I think if we think in terms of regulation, we think in terms of information, we think in terms of communication. All of the things are kind of the bedrock of establishing trusts. But at the end of the day, they also work against trusts. So can you see, for instance, our inability to understand and disseminate knowledge from, for instance, as Jan said, you know, a user agreement, to be able to say, do I actually have enough intelligence and knowledge to click the box to allow my information to be exposed? And the inability of the company to communicate information effectively, is that actually the company engaging in disinformation? And I think these are coming into the questions of how can we use technology and how can we use information and communication better to create trust between all the different parties that are part of moving this planet forward and moving our agenda forward. And I think those are kind of the big questions that we're going to be facing as we look at the collaboration engagement here at GATE. How do we bring these questions to the forefront of how do we build trust around this open environment for innovation here? So.
Can I? That was a great way to end it. I didn't want to.
So, but I saw the time, we're a little bit over, but thank you very much, all of you, for listening today. And we'll leave it with that. So thank you, Sylvia.